Hello, you beautiful nerds. So the other day, I was like, you know what? I feel like sitting in a dark room and crying for hours. Then I thought, oh, I could go see that new Black Panther movie. That's an acceptable way to do that. I don't even watch trailers like that, and I knew that this was gonna be an emotional outing at the theaters. This movie might have had the hardest assignment of any other sequel in film history. Even in the situation when Heath Ledger passed away, he wasn't the titular character of the franchise. It would be an understatement to call 2018's Black Panther a hit. It was a freaking movement. Remember when everybody was doing this to each other? It was great. But after the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman, Ryan Coogler and the rest of the team had to go back to the proverbial drawing board and tell the next chapter of this story. This is going to be a spoiler review because I don't know how to talk about the things I love in this movie without getting into the nitty gritty. So if you don't want to get spoiled, now's a good time to pause and come back later. But if you ain't afraid of no spoilers, get your tissues ready because we're about to talk about... A year after T'Challa's death, Wakanda is still mourning the loss of their king. Ramonda sits on the throne and is being pressured from the outside world to share their vibranium technology. Meanwhile, there's a mysterious force doing extra spooky stuff, and the Wakandans are getting blamed for it. I did mention before in a previous video that I loved the 2018 Black Panther film, but this film has more parallels to Black Panther's debut film, Civil War. A struggle with morality of avenging a loved one, a character embracing their new responsibilities, and a kid from the comics who is introduced halfway through the movie. The first Black Panther felt like an event, and this one does too, but in a different way. Where Black Panther felt like a coming out party, this felt like a New Orleans wake. It's happy, but it's so sad. This movie is so sad, y'all. This does feel like the most grown-up Marvel movie there's been so far. I mean, I love Shang-Chi and No Way Home and even the first Black Panther movie. But those movies were kind of cute. And there are some Marvel comedy moments in this one, but it's toned down a lot. And it had to be. Shuri is not a fun character anymore, but it makes total sense that she's not. She's kind of dealing with a lot this movie. The whole film isn't dripping with despair, but they didn't undercut the emotional moments with something goofy as if to say, Psh, I'm not about to cry. I was just joking. Fart noise. But this movie is like, I know you're crying because I'm crying. Let's cry together. And in that aspect, I feel like it succeeds better than like 90% of comic book flicks. The rest of the story that isn't specifically tied to the grieving main characters is also compelling. You see, the reckless whites of the world are mad at Wakanda because they won't share their vibranium with everyone else. But it is not lost on Wakanda that everyone else in the world is slap out they mind. At one point, Martin Freeman's character says to Julia Louis-Dreyfus, can you imagine what America would do if they were the only ones with vibranium? And Julia says, I dream of it. A very chilling back and forth that gets a massive point across in only a few lines. By the way, that's the only enjoyable moment in the movie between these two. We could have used a lot less of them and a little bit more M'Baku in these scenes, if you know what I mean.
The new king is a U.S. The new king.
People have been complaining that this phase of the MCU hasn't been setting enough stuff for the future, but in my opinion, all of the setup stuff they did in this movie was exactly the stuff that didn't work for me. These two didn't even need to be in the movie. They're trying to make Ross the Felix to Black Panther's James Bond, and I'm not loving it. We've already established how resourceful the Wakandans are. The idea that they constantly need help from a low-level CIA operative is laughable. And I honestly don't know what is going on with Julia. I mean, she used to be a good actor, right? The Riri stuff was pretty benign. If you're gonna have a MacGuffin in the form of a kid, why not let it be Riri? She didn't get much character development, but she's not that important to this story, so she doesn't need it. The only time the character did get a little annoying was when the movie tried to hit us over the head with how important she's gonna be in the future. Though I wish we didn't get an Ironheart suit in this movie, especially when it's so clunky compared to the other suit that Shuri just built. I mean, it's basically an Iron Man suit too. I did like Dominique Thorne. She's a wonderful actress. Pause this and go watch Judas and the Black Messiah right now. And I liked all the references to Tony Stark's creation of the first few suits. So I felt like there were a few too many moving parts for us to introduce the Ironheart suit and then immediately take it away at the end. I mean, she didn't have to be in the final fight. She's like the only character that doesn't need to be and probably shouldn't be in the fight. But in the absence of Shuri being the plucky tech genius, Riri was a good replacement. Speaking of Letitia Wright, she was sensational. Her character damn near did a whole 180 switching from the funny sidekick to the titular hero of the franchise in the span of one movie. That's a lot, but she handled it gracefully. I am glad that she decided not to take up the throne. I always felt like Black Panther insisting on being the ruler of an entire country and a vigilante avenger was T'Challa kind of doing the most. I love the stories we get in the comics that take place solely in Wakanda, and it's obvious that they're teeing up the Ta-Nehisi Coates run of the comics for the upcoming Wakanda Disney Plus series, but we gotta see Black Panther out in the world doing her thing. Plus, when we met T'Challa, he wasn't king yet. He was just a Black Panther. So I think it's smart for her to learn how to be a hero without simultaneously learning how to rule. But now we got a Q-Dog as the king, so it's about to get wild in Wakanda. And speaking of ruling, let's talk about the real woman king, Angela Bassett. She is phenomenal in this movie, and this might be my second favorite performance of hers. Shuri is the lead, but Ramonda is the emotional center of the story. If the movie is a ship and Shuri is the captain, Ramonda is the wind and the sails. Also, fun fact, Angela Bassett is John Major's arm double for the new Creed movie. Obviously, I'm kidding, but seriously, did somebody tell Angela that she was going to be the new Black Panther or something? Like, when did she eat the heart-shaped herb? I would not be surprised if this ended up being the first Marvel role to be nominated for an Oscar. I mean, she's incredible throughout, but she blew the damn doors off of that throne room scene. Her and Denai Guerrero were so good at it. Damn, this movie is so sad. This movie is so sad, y'all. Let's talk about Namor for a second. Or should I say, Namor. I like all the changes that they made to Namor's origin. It made his backstory more tragic and relatable while also serving as more of a parallel to Wakanda. Side note, I think it's funny that people who aren't from Talokan pronounce his name Namor. It's obviously how it's pronounced in the comics, but I feel like that's also a nod to people who mispronounce words and names that aren't from their native dialect, like Los Feliz and Los Feliz, or Gojira and Godzilla.
Yeah, I'd like 6,000 chicken fajitas, please.
But yeah, I was on board with this character from the beginning. In the comics, Namor just kind of hated pollution from the surface world, and we do see that that is important to him. But this story is more rooted in the history of oppression of Latin American persons, in a similar vein that the first film reflected on the oppression of Black Americans and Africans. In fact, Namor is kind of like if Killmonger was raised in Wakanda and made king. His main concern is the protection of his people, but the trauma of his past influences every decision that he makes. The one thing that I was sure that they were not gonna get right is the wings on his feet. I always thought they looked pretty goofy in the comics, to be honest. But here they have this fantastical, godlike look to it, while also being unsettling and kind of frightening. The sound design is doing a lot of work with that. It almost made the wing flaps feel like a rattlesnake or a wasp's wings. It definitely helps, along with the visuals, to make him feel like an intimidating force. Talokan was dope. It felt like an actual thriving community, so when they showed the parallels with Wakanda, it hit home really well. They earned those moments. It definitely felt more, lack of a better word, real than Atlantis from Aquaman. I haven't even seen that movie, but from the clips I have seen, it looks like there's some Little Mermaid bullshittery going on down there. The final fight between the Wakandans and the Talokan had me feeling a lot of feelings. The cinematography, CGI, and choreography took a big step up compared to the final fight of the last movie, and all of that made it look beautiful, but there's a layer of tragedy underneath because they should all be working together, not fighting. It's like, damn, don't y'all know that this is just white folks' fault?
Can't we all just get along?
Which makes the moment where Shuri decides not to kill him even more impactful. Also, the fact that Shuri does a slightly altered version of this line from T'Challa in Civil War.
Vengeance has consumed you. It's consuming them. I'm done letting it consume me.
This just doesn't feel like an MCU film, and I mean that in the best way possible. It seems like the studio really pulled back and let Coogler tell an emotionally driven story, and that let a lot of his directorial style really shine through more so than in the last movie. It was so charged with sadness, and it needed to be handled with that kind of care. I always talk about how much I don't like Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and it's mainly because they had the chance to tell a great story about absentee parents, grief, and generational trauma. But instead, in my opinion, they focus more on the turd jokes and the piss jokes and so on. But Coogler has an uncanny ability to take a world that could look silly and fake from the outside just because of how popular it is, and he manages to highlight the aspects that make the audience go, oh, there are real people in there. Seriously, I was trying to count all the scenes that made me cry in this movie, and after I got to number 10, I was like, I'm just gonna stop counting. It's just sad. This movie is sad, y'all. It's not a perfect movie, and nothing will beat the excitement of seeing 2018's Black Panther for the first time. But in every way, story, special effects, cinematography, performance, it's all an upgrade in my opinion, so I might just like this one a little bit more. Still not sure where that ranks in my top 5. It's kind of hard to make a list of that when they keep coming out with movies, but it's definitely my favorite Marvel movie of the year. My ranking, I loved it. Okay, that is all for this review. Don't forget to check out our super fun chat we had with the amazing LaRon Reedus about the Goofy movie and the critically acclaimed episode of Atlanta, The Goof Who Sat by the Door. I guess I should review that new Avatar movie that's coming out. It's the time for blue water people. But anyway, until next time, stay safe, my little chicken fajitas, and may the force be with you.